According to the famous director Orson Welles, only once in a generation are there women who capture the attention of the entire world. So, let's find out who are the fairest of them all. Which women in the history of humanity were so irresistible? And did beauty bring them happiness? Who were considered the most beautiful women in the world in the 15th and 19th centuries? And if you watch this video until the end, you'll find out whom Orson Welles was talking about exactly. In ancient Greece, in the 4th century BCE, the famous Athenian courtesan named Phryne was considered the epitome of beauty. She possessed such extraordinary beauty, especially her body, that thousands admired her. Several images of her have survived to this day. This sculpture was precisely created based on her. Ancient Greeks considered blue-eyed blondes with straight noses and high foreheads very beautiful. But judging by this fresco, which is believed to depict Phryne, she was a brunette. As the ancient Greek historian Athenaeus writes, I quote, "The most beautiful parts of Phryne's body were those not customarily exposed." Phryne, the beauty, seems to have deliberately chosen to become a courtesan rather than getting married, escaping from home. The reason being that wives in ancient Greece had no rights or freedoms. They were not even listed as citizens. They were the property of men, husbands, and sons who could dispose of them until death. Some vague hints of freedom were only available to courtesans. They were allowed to behave freely, use perfumes and cosmetics, own property, and interact with unfamiliar men. Not to mention ancient Greece, where just about 110 years ago women were forbidden from obtaining higher education and pursuing science. And when all this was permitted, women were not allowed to use the main entrance to the university or go to the upper floors of the building where men worked. How fortunate we are to live in an era where there is practically no division between men's and women's work. Although stereotypes about which jobs are more suitable for women and which they supposedly cannot handle still exist, of course. A night of love with Phryne cost a fortune. She chose her lovers herself. By the age of 25, Phryne had amassed such a fabulous fortune that when Alexander the Great destroyed the huge walls of Thebes, she offered to rebuild them at her own expense. It was she who posed for the most famous statue in the ancient world, the Aphrodite of Knidos, created by the genius Praxiteles. This naked statue of Aphrodite brought her immense fame. But it was precisely the fame gained thanks to the famous statue of Aphrodite that became the cause of her misfortunes. A rejected admirer, the orator Euthias, accused Phryne of impiety and sacrilege, as well as of corrupting outstanding citizens, whom she allegedly turned away from serving the good of the fatherland. During the trial of the beautiful courtesan, her defender, having exhausted all arguments, removed her clothes, and Phryne's beauty saved her. 200 enchanted jurors unanimously acquitted her. After all, the Greeks believed that such a perfect body could not conceal an imperfect soul. The judges were seized with sacred awe, and they dared not execute the priestess of Aphrodite, wrote the historian Athenaeus. That's how beauty saved Phryne. Agnes Sorel entered history as the Lady of Beauty, the first official mistress in the history of France. She was 22 years old when the 40-year-old King of France, Charles VII, first saw her at court. His wife, Marie of Anjou, was remarkably unattractive. It's no wonder the young beauty simply dazzled the king. He was willing to do anything for her. He showered her with gifts, luxurious dresses, jewels, and castles. His wife, the queen, had to accept that he never parted with Agnes for a moment. She even accompanied him to the royal council. All her contemporaries unanimously assured that she was simply irresistible. Chronicler Jean Chartier said she was the most beautiful among all the women in the world. The medieval knight of pen and sword, Olivier de la Marque, confirmed, yes, undoubtedly she was one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. And even the Pope, Pius II, said she had the most beautiful face imaginable. Of course, it's very difficult to form an opinion about her true beauty based on medieval portraits. However, not long ago, the French reconstructed Agnes's appearance from her skull. And now we see that she was indeed extraordinarily beautiful. Scientists have found that she also had a very fair, almost milky white complexion. Agnes was not only beautiful, but she also forever changed medieval women's perceptions of fashion. She persuaded the king to allow diamonds to be worn not only by royalty. She was the first to pluck her eyebrows, introduced long 6-meter trains into fashion. But her most unusual innovation was this strange neckline. Yes, she walked around the palace with one breast exposed. By the way, her followers wore the so-called wandering neckline, used powder and lipstick for the chest. Agnes, the Lady of Beauty, is also compared to Joan of Arc. King Francis I was convinced that the main credit for freeing France from the English belonged to the most beautiful woman of the 15th century. During the 100 Years' War at that time, England was capturing more and more French territories, and the king was always indulging in amusements. Then Agnes told him that in childhood an astrologer predicted that the bravest king would fall in love with her. But she supposedly mistook that it was Charles, as he was too effeminate and hardly concerned with the affairs of the kingdom. She supposedly had to go to the King of England. After these words, the enamored Charles threw all his efforts into driving the English out of French territory. That's the power of beauty. Of course, many court ladies simply hated her. Her open relationship with the king, daring outfits, caused outrage. But she was forgiven everything for her extraordinary beauty. She bore the king 3 daughters and unexpectedly died at the age of 25. In 2005, scientists found out that the most beautiful girl of the 15th century was poisoned. The mercury level in the bones of the royal favorite exceeds the human body's non-lethal values by 100,000 times. Natasha Goncharova. Her close friend and neighbor named Nadezhda Arabkina described her like this: Natalie was distinguished by rare beauty even as a girl. She was always surrounded by a swarm of admirers and suitors. The title of Moscow's first beauty belonged to her. Strong, agile. She was unusually proportioned, which made every movement graceful. Kind, cheerful eyes, with a mischievous spark under long velvet lashes. But Natalie's main charm was her naturalness and lack of affectation. Most considered her a flirt, but the accusation was unfair. Incredibly expressive eyes, a charming smile, and an engaging simplicity, against her will, captivated everyone. It was not her fault that everything about her was so remarkably good. However, despite all her beauty, Natalie was painfully silent and shy. Count Sologub described her appearance like this: tall, with a fabulously thin waist against the lushly developed shoulders and chest. Kutuzov's granddaughter, the famous hostess of the literary salon Dolly Feichelman, said of her, "She is a work of the Creator, before whom one can kneel for hours." She was elected queen of the ball more than once. Even through her portraits, people fell in love with her. The emperor himself, at one of the balls, brought Natalie to the empress and said to her, "Look and admire." Yet, she herself remained indifferent to her beauty and once wrote to her second husband Peter Lansky, "I am not entitled to pride in my appearance, for it was given by God." This extraordinary beauty, against her will, drew Dante, Pushkin's murderer, to her. After the poet's death, no one ever heard her laugh. She hardly went out into society, only visited close friends and acquaintances, and dedicated her life to her children. She remarried at 32. They said that by this time she had become even more beautiful. Out of the most enviable suitors, she chose the one who accepted her children as his own. People gossiped, neither Natalie nor Lansky have anything. and society wonders at this union of hunger with need. They lived quietly. 3 more daughters were born to them, and Natalia fully devoted herself to the children. They were her calling. There were a total of 14 children in the house. In addition to their 7, she raised 5 of Lanskoy's nephews who were left without parents, and 2 sons of her friends. She never raised her voice and was equally kind and gentle with all the children. Lanskoy adored her, and when he was traveling for service, he always surrounded himself with her portraits. She wrote to Peter, "The union of 2 hearts is the greatest happiness on earth." Her letters to him were filled with tenderness and respect. However, on her deathbed, she will call for Pushkin, not Lanskoy. At the end of the 19th century, the most beautiful woman in the world was considered to be Lina Cavalieri. She was born into a poor family in Italy and began working from an early age. Her extraordinary beauty quickly attracted attention. Despite not having outstanding vocal abilities, Lina became a popular opera singer and later the first and most popular fashion model in history. Photos of the most beautiful woman in the world were distributed worldwide in crazy numbers. Her face and name were everywhere at that time. Her admirers were ready to do anything for her. Rumor has it that 840 people proposed to her, but she never managed to marry her beloved. In 1897, Lina Cavalieri came to Russia to perform at the theater. There she met Prince Alexander Beryatinsky, the heir to one of the richest families in the empire. The young people fell in love with each other. The prince showered Lina with priceless jewels. The St. Petersburg newspaper in 1899 notes that at the opening of the Bear restaurant, the Italian beauty was adorned with diamonds worth at least 200,000. The prince was so in love that he asked Emperor Nicholas II for permission to marry her. But he received the highest refusal. Beryatinsky belonged to one of the noble Russian families and could not discredit the family with such a marriage. In 1901, Beryatinsky married Catherine Yurievskaya, the illegitimate and legitimized daughter of Emperor Alexander II. She resembled his beloved Lina in some ways. And she remembered, "He dressed her the same way I did. He made her use my perfumes. He gave her affectionate names he called me." The prince's wife tried her best. She styled her hair like Cavalieri's and even befriended her. They were often seen together. But she could not do anything. There was only room in her husband's heart for one. Overcome with grief, he died at 39. The most beautiful woman in the world tried to forget him and married several times, but none of the marriages lasted long. One was even annulled immediately after the honeymoon. "I want to express to you the deepest feelings. My heart has cherished love for you all my life," Lina wrote in her book At the Sunset of Her Life. A film called The Most Beautiful Woman in the World was made about Lina Cavalieri. Another famous beauty, Gina Lollobrigida, played her role. In the second half of the 19th century, the first beauty of the Russian Empire was considered to be Zinaida Yusupova. The aunt of the Spanish king Infante Eulalia, who visited Russia, wrote that Zinaida Yusupova resembled an ancient empress. The princess was extraordinarily beautiful with the beauty that symbolizes the era. She was called the Princess of Radiance because she radiated purity, light, kindness, and zest for life. At the same time, she was the heiress to a huge fortune. Only the Romanovs were richer than the Yusupovs in Russia. Incredibly beautiful, incredibly rich, and yet absolutely indifferent to jewels, although she owned the best in the world. She constantly wore only the famous Pellegrina pearl, in which she posed in many portraits. Here's how her son, Felix, described her. "Mother was delightful, tall, thin, graceful, dark-skinned and black-haired, with eyes shining like stars, intelligent, educated, artistic, kind. No one could resist her charms. But she did not boast of her gifts, but was simple and modest. The more you are given, she repeated to me and my brother, the more you should give to others. Be modest. If you are superior to others in something, may God forbid you to show it to them. She danced magnificently. Dancing was her passion. It cost her nothing to perform folk dances in aristocratic society and earn enthusiastic approval and ovations. Even Stanislavski invited her to join his troupe. Of course, she had no shortage of suitors, including princes. Yet, she decided to marry only for love. Her son recalled, famous Europeans, including royals, courted her. However, she turned them all down, wanting to choose a spouse to her liking. Grandfather dreamed of seeing his daughter on the throne and was now saddened by her lack of ambition. He was utterly distraught when he learned that she was marrying Count Sumarokov-Elston, a mere guards officer. The society deemed this marriage a misalliance. And the Princess of Radiance remained faithful to her first and only love, a humble Russian officer, her entire life. Although admirers continued to pursue her even after her marriage. Zinaida Yusupova dedicated herself to her husband and children. She entrusted her entire fortune to her husband's management and engaged in charity and raising children. The main tragedy in the Princess of Radiance's life was connected to them. She gave birth to 4 children, but only 2 survived, Nicholas and Felix. There was a legend in the Yusupov family about an ancient family curse. It was said that only 1 child in the Yusupov family could survive, all the others did not live past the age of 6. And indeed, it was so from generation to generation. When Zinaida gave birth to Felix, his elder brother Nicholas was so terrified by the stories of the curse that he wanted to throw his brother out the window. Nicholas died just shy of his 26th birthday in a duel over a married woman. Since then, Zinaida never let her younger son Felix out of her sight, as he resembled her so much. It's worth mentioning that the most beautiful woman of the Russian Empire in the second half of the 19th century was also remarkably straightforward and always spoke the truth, even to royal personages. The renowned artist Valentin Serev, who was not particularly fond of society lionesses and never flattered them, admired Zinaida Yusupova. If all wealthy people, princess, were like you, there would be no room for injustice, he said to her. To which she replied, injustice cannot be eradicated, especially not with money. Her son Felix was one of Rasputin's assassins, and she fully justified him. He claimed he killed the monsters that wanted to destroy Russia. She was conveyed the words of the emperor, spoken by him in exile, when you see Princess Yusupova, tell her that I understood how right her warnings were. If they had listened to them, many tragedies would have been avoided. After the revolution, the Yusupovs were able to leave for Europe. Unlike other Russian aristocrats, they managed to take many valuables abroad. Moreover, they had property there. Zinaida lacked nothing and continued her charitable work. With her assistance, job search bureaus, free canteens for immigrants, and sewing workshops were established. One journalist wrote about her in the 1920s, the smartest and most sensible of them turned out to be the old woman Yusupova. The old princess did not dwell on the past. In short, she not only accepted the situation that had arisen as inevitable, but also tried to facilitate others' transition to the new path, to give them the opportunity to earn their daily bread. That's Vivien Leigh. A famous film director said the phrase with which we started this video, once in a generation, there appear women who the entire world cannot take their eyes off. And indeed, violet eyes, a sculpted face, an inexplicable allure. Looking at her photos evokes a strange feeling of happiness. Whose beauty still acts so astonishingly? Yet, she herself did not value her appearance at all. Vivien Leigh seemed to think that her extraordinary beauty prevented her from being taken seriously as an actress. But 2 Oscars disagree with that. Vivian Mary Hartley, alias Vivian Leigh, was born in India, spent her childhood in a monastery in England, and already there realized she wanted to be an actress. Her parents supported her, and with her father's help, she enrolled at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. After her first performance, she was talked about as a great actress. She had the ability to change moods lightning fast. The audience was simply delighted. It was then that she met the man of her dreams, the famous actor Laurence Olivier, whom she would love all her life. Despite both being involved with others at the time, they began living together and eventually obtained divorces and got married. In 1939, Vivian Leigh played Scarlett in Gone with the Wind. This role brought her worldwide acclaim and her first Oscar, yet Vivian herself was not thrilled with her fame or with movies. She loved the theater. The great actress wrote, "I can't stand Hollywood. I will never get used to it. How I hate filming movies." By the way, she became friends with Clark Gable, who played Rhett Butler, and his wife. The actress who played Melanie even became her close friend. However, she didn't get along with the actor who portrayed Ashley Wilkes, Scarlett's love interest, at all. About her character, Vivian said, "I hope I have one quality that Scarlett never had, a sense of humor. I want to find joy in life. And she has one quality that, I think, I will never have, selfishness." When everything seemed so good, she began to face problems. She fell ill with tuberculosis, lost a child, and then started having mental health issues, nervous breakdowns. According to one version, this was a side effect of the medication she was treated with for tuberculosis. Vivian Leigh's deep depression was treated with electroshock therapy in a psychiatric clinic. Burn marks from this barbaric procedure remained on Vivian's temples. After leaving the psychiatric clinic, she and Laurence Olivier began to argue constantly. Once, he even publicly slapped her, and she slapped him back. However, Vivian managed to recover and starred in A Streetcar Named Desire. First in the theater, and then in the film adaptation with Marlon Brando. This film earned her a second Oscar. Critics said that in A Streetcar Named Desire she even surpassed her brilliant performance in Gone with the Wind. However, her personal life was in shambles. Laurence Olivier cheated on her, and she cheated on him. Both didn't hide their affairs. She became pregnant and again lost a child. After this, Vivian was once again admitted to a psychiatric clinic. Now directors were afraid to cast her in their movies, fearing she was unpredictable and could lose control at any moment. In 1960, Vivian Leigh and Laurence Olivier officially divorced. He remarried, and she never married again. Vivian loved Laurence Olivier all her life. She continued to act in the theater and in films. Tuberculosis claimed the great actress at the age of 53. So, who do you consider the most beautiful woman in history? Share in the comments.